The millionaire's daughter had 48 hours to live, but the poor nanny hid a miracle. No one expected unfairly expelled, she was accused of theft and separated from the child she had helped to save. But when the doctors lost all hope, it was her touch that changed everything. With a simple gesture, the fever stopped and life returned to the girl's eyes. In that hospital, before everyone, it became clear. The miracle wasn't in the medicine. It was in the nanny's hands. The winding road that led to the Appalachian Mountains seemed endless to Jasmine Smith. Coming from the modest neighborhood of the South Bronx in New York City, she watched through the bus window as the landscape gradually transformed. The deep green of the mountains contrasted with the blue sky of Aspen Creek, North Carolina, the town that now welcomed her with its cold breeze and imposing mansions. Jasmine's hands nervously clutched the worn fabric bag, a gift from her grandmother Celeste, a well-known healer in the neighborhood where she had grown up. Inside, besides a few clothes, she carried a small vial of rosemary oil, a wooden rosary, and a notebook with jotted down prayers and herbs she had learned from her grandmother. It was all she had left of her, besides the memories and the teachings whispered between herbal infusions and blessings. "Next stop, miss," the driver announced, interrupting her reflections. Jasmine tidied her curly hair and stepped off, feeling the region's peculiar chill envelop her thin body, inadequately dressed for the climate. Following the instructions she had received over the phone, she took the only available taxi at the small bus station. To the Pines estate, the Hunter residence. "Please," she said, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice. The taxi driver eyed her in the rearview mirror with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Going to work at Dr. Richard Hunter's house? Good luck, miss. They say that house hasn't heard laughter in a long time." Jasmine managed a polite smile. She had already heard comments about the family during her phone interview with the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a sick child, an absent father, an authoritarian grandmother, and the shadow of a mother who was no longer present. When the taxi stopped in front of the imposing iron gates, Jasmine felt a tightness in her chest. The mansion, built in a European style, stood solitary on top of a small hill, surrounded by pine trees that looked like silent sentinels. It seemed colder than the rest of the town, as if the sun avoided that place. "You must be the new nanny," a deep, emotionless voice greeted her as soon as she passed through the gates. It was Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, a woman with a rigid posture and watchful eyes that sized her up from head to toe. "Mrs. Beatrice is waiting for you in the study. Follow me and don't touch anything." Jasmine followed the woman through hallways adorned with old paintings and furniture that smelled of wax and tradition. Each step echoed on the wooden floor, announcing her arrival. Curious glances from the few staff members followed her as she passed. At the end of a long corridor, Mrs. Gable knocked softly on a dark wooden door and opened it without waiting for a reply. "The girl has arrived, Mrs. Beatrice," she announced, gesturing for Jasmine to enter. Seated behind a mahogany desk, a woman of about 70 stared at her with cold, piercing eyes. Her perfectly coiffed hair and discreet but visibly expensive jewelry declared her position. Mrs. Beatrice Hunter had the rigidity of someone who had commanded people her entire life. "Approach," the matriarch ordered. Jasmine Smith, 26 years old, no nursing degree, only experience as a nanny, and what else? Yes, traditional care knowledge is what you put on your resume. Jasmine felt the contempt in the last words. "Yes, ma'am. I learned a lot from my grandmother about natural care, and we are not hiring a folk healer, girl," Mrs. Beatrice interrupted. "We need someone who will strictly follow medical instructions. My granddaughter, Amelia, is a delicate child. Ever since my daughter—" She paused, a flicker of pain crossing her eyes for an instant. "Ever since we lost Lucy, Amelia's health has become even more fragile." Jasmine remained silent, respectful. "The rules of this house are simple," Mrs. Beatrice continued. "Medication at the exact times, no food outside the prescribed diet, limited activities, no strong emotions or outbursts. Amelia has serious respiratory problems, and any change can trigger a crisis. My son Richard is rarely home due to business, so I am the one who coordinates everything here." The old woman stood and walked to the window, from which one could see the perfectly manicured garden, without a single flower out of place. Any problems? You report to Mrs. Gable first. Do not disturb Amelia with unnecessary stories or conversations. Do not excite her with boisterous games. Do not introduce any food or substances that have not been approved by Dr. Paul. Your room is upstairs, next to hers, so you can attend to her during the night, if necessary. Turning to face Jasmine again, Mrs. Beatrice concluded, and most importantly, do not try to replace her mother. No, one can. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am, Jasmine replied, feeling the weight of the words. You may go. Mrs. Gable will show you to your room and the rest of the house. You will meet Amelia after you are settled. As she followed the housekeeper up the stairs, Jasmine felt the heavy atmosphere of the house. The rooms, though luxurious, seemed devoid of life. The drawn curtains blocked the natural light, and the silence was broken only by the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the hallway. This is your room, said Mrs. Gable, opening a door. It was a simple room compared to the rest of the house, but still more comfortable than the small room she shared with two cousins in New York. Amelia's room is that one, she pointed to a door at the end of the hall. She is resting now. You'll meet her at dinner. When she was finally alone, Jasmine opened the small window in her room, letting in some fresh air. She took the portrait of her grandmother Celeste from her bag and placed it on the nightstand. Give me strength, Grandma, she whispered. After arranging her few belongings, she decided to explore the hallway. She quietly approached the door to Amelia's room and, hearing no sound, carefully pushed it ajar. In the dimness of the room decorated with cloud-patterned wallpaper, a pale girl of about 7 was sitting on the bed, looking out the window. Her brown hair fell straight to her shoulders, framing a delicate and sad face. Even without turning, she sensed Jasmine's presence. "Are you the new nanny?" she asked, her voice as fragile as fine porcelain. "Yes," Jasmine replied softly, entering the room. "My name is Jasmine, and you must be Amelia." The girl turned slowly. Her large, dark eyes seemed to carry a sadness incompatible with her age. "You'll leave soon, like the others." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Jasmine approached and sat on the edge of the bed. "Why do you say that?" "No one can stand Grandma for very long," Amelia answered, turning back to the window. "And I'm very sick. I can't do anything fun." There was a resignation in the child's voice that broke Jasmine's heart. Instinctively, she touched Amelia's small, cold hand. "You know, my grandmother always said that you can find joy even in the quietest places." For the first time, a glimmer of curiosity lit up the girl's eyes. "How?" "With stories," Jasmine smiled. "They take us to other places without us ever having to leave the bed." "Do you know a lot of stories?" Amelia asked, a slight enthusiasm coloring her voice. "More than I could tell in a whole year," Jasmine assured her, feeling that she had found a small crack in that fortress of sadness. A noise at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Gable was watching them with a serious expression. "Dinner will be served in 30 minutes. Amelia needs to get ready." As Jasmine left the room, she felt Amelia's eyes following her. She had planted a seed of hope, but she knew the soil would be difficult to cultivate in this house, where affection seemed as rationed as the sunbeams that barely penetrated the heavy curtains. At dinner, she briefly met Richard Hunter, a tall, elegant man with tired eyes that barely lingered on her. He kissed his daughter on the forehead, talked briefly with his mother about business, and retreated to his study, promising Amelia he would see her at breakfast. At the end of that first day, lying in her new bed, Jasmine thought about the mission ahead of her. She wouldn't just be a nanny, but someone who would try to bring light to that gloomy house. With that thought, she fell asleep, dreaming of her grandmother Celeste, who smiled and said, "Remember, my child, sometimes the strongest medicine is the one that doesn't come in vials but in gestures." The first rays of sun had not yet crossed the mountains of Aspen Creek when Jasmine woke up. The chilly morning air made her curl up tighter in her blanket, but the soft chime of her alarm reminded her of her responsibilities. It was her third day at the Hunter mansion, and she had already realized that punctuality was a non-negotiable virtue in that place. She dressed quickly in the simple uniform Mrs. Gable had given her, a navy blue skirt, a white shirt, and a discreet apron. As she tied up her hair, she heard a dry cough from the next room. Amelia was awake. "Good morning, little one," Jasmine said as she entered the girl's room. How did you sleep? Amelia, sitting up in bed with a textbook in her lap, just shrugged, the dark circles under her. Eyes revealed another night of restless sleep. Do you want me to open the curtains a little? It's a beautiful day outside. Grandma says the morning sun can make my allergies worse, the girl replied, without looking up from her book. Jasmine bit her lip, holding back the response that came to mind. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed. What are you studying so intently? Geography. I have to finish before the private tutor arrives at 10, Amelia explained, her voice monotonous. Grandma said that even if I'm sick, I can't fall behind in my studies. Jasmine. Noticed the weight of that routine on the child's small shoulders. There was no room for play or for simply being a child in that house. She decided it was time to start changing that, even if little by little. Do you know the invisible map game? She asked, gently closing Amelia's book. The girl frowned, confused. There's no such thing as an invisible map. Of course there is, Jasmine smiled. It's a map we make with our imagination. Come on, lie down and close your eyes. Hesitantly, Amelia obeyed. Jasmine began to trace imaginary lines in the air above. The girl. I'm drawing the most beautiful river in America. Can you see it? It's the Mississippi River, so wide that sometimes it looks like a sea. Its waters flow through forests where colorful birds and monkeys live, jumping from branch to branch. To Jasmine's surprise, a faint smile appeared on Amelia's lips. Are there alligators too? She asked, still with her eyes closed. Lots of them, and legends of river spirits that transform into handsome young men at parties by the riverbank. A stifled laugh escaped Amelia, and Jasmine felt as if she had won a small victory. The bedroom door opened abruptly, revealing Mrs. Beatrice. Her stern gaze swept over the scene. Amelia lying down, book closed, lesson apparently interrupted. Jasmine stood up quickly. Good morning, Mrs. Beatrice. We were just doing a little exercise of... Wasting time from what I can see, the matriarch cut in. Amelia has a strict schedule to follow. Geography at 7, math at 8, reading at 9. Miss Elisa will be here soon and expects a prepared student, not a girl with her head full of stories. Amelia immediately returned to a rigid posture, picking up the book and opening it to the marked page. Her brief moment of joy evaporated like dew in the strong sun. I'm sorry, Grandma, the girl murmured. Mrs. Beatrice turned her attention to Jasmine. As for you, go to the kitchen and bring Amelia's breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast without butter, and the herbal tea Dr. Paul prescribed. Nothing more, nothing less. Jasmine nodded, casting a comforting glance at Amelia before leaving. In the hallway she met Joe, the elderly gardener, who meticulously tended to the perfectly aligned flower beds in the garden. Don't take it the wrong way, miss, he said in a low voice, leaning on his broom. Mrs. Beatrice wasn't always like this. Ever since Mrs. Lucy passed, it's like something dried up inside her. What exactly happened to Amelia's mother? Jasmine asked, seizing the moment of confidence. Joe looked around, making sure no one else was there. It was during the girl's birth. Complications, you know. Mrs. Beatrice never forgave herself. She always says if she'd been here and not traveling, she would have seen the signs sooner. Dr. Richard was devastated, buried himself in his work. And the child, well, the child was born under the shadow of that sadness. A piece of the puzzle fell into place for Jasmine. Mrs. Beatrice's coldness hid a deep pain, a guilt she projected onto her own granddaughter, the child whose arrival coincided with her daughter's departure. In the kitchen, while preparing the tray for Amelia, Jasmine noticed a small radio hidden in a corner. Betty, the cook, noticed her interest. It's my companion while I work, the stout woman explained, but I only turn it on when the mistress is on the other side of the house. She says music is a distraction from work. Jasmine smiled, an idea forming in her mind. In the following days, Jasmine slowly gained Amelia's trust. During study sessions, she incorporated small games that made learning more fun. When Mrs. Beatrice wasn't around, she told stories about the constellations, about her grandmother's healing rituals, about the colorful parties of her childhood in the city suburbs. One afternoon, taking advantage of Mrs. Beatrice's absence for a meeting at the local church, Jasmine brought the small radio to Amelia's room. I'm going to teach you a song my grandmother used to sing to me when I was sick, she said, tuning to a station playing classic American folk music. Amelia, sitting in the armchair by the window, looked apprehensively at the door. "What if Grandma finds out?" "She won't find out," Jasmine assured her, lowering the volume. "Besides, music is good for the soul. My grandmother always said that certain songs have the power to heal more than any medicine." She began to hum a lullaby softly, swaying her body gently. She took Amelia's hands and invited her to stand up. "I don't know how to dance," the girl confessed, insecure. "You don't need to know how, just let your body move however it wants." Reluctant at first, Amelia gradually loosened up. Soon a genuine smile lit up her face as she twirled around the room, guided by Jasmine's firm hands. It was at that moment that the door opened. But it wasn't Mrs. Beatrice watching them, it was Richard Hunter. "Daddy!" Amelia exclaimed, frozen. Jasmine hurried to turn off the radio, her heart racing. "Dr. Hunter, I can explain." To her surprise, Richard showed no irritation. His eyes were fixed on his daughter, specifically on the healthy blush that now colored her normally pale cheeks and the smile he hadn't seen in a long time. "I didn't know." "You liked music, Amelia," he said, entering the room. "Jasmine was teaching me a song from her grandmother," the girl explained, with an animation that surprised her father. Richard observed the nanny with curiosity. It was the first time he had truly noticed her since her arrival. Jasmine held his gaze, determined to defend the small moment of joy she had provided for the girl. "Dr. Hunter, I know I may have overstepped some boundaries, but I believe a little music can help Amelia to smile," he completed, with an unexpected softness in his voice. I couldn't remember what her smile looked like anymore. A silence charged with emotion filled the room. Richard cleared his throat, composing himself. "I'm home early today. I thought I'd have dinner with Amelia." "Are you really going to have dinner with me, Daddy?" the girl asked, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Yes," he confirmed, adjusting his tie as if he suddenly felt uncomfortable with the intensity of his daughter's emotion. "We'll have dinner in the garden if you're feeling up to it." "I feel great. Jasmine said that movement is good for the body and the soul." Richard looked at Jasmine, an enigmatic expression on his face. "It seems you've brought some changes to this house, miss." Before Jasmine could respond, they heard footsteps in the hall. Mrs. Beatrice appeared, and her scrutinizing gaze immediately took in the unusual scene. Her son, home before nightfall, her granddaughter flushed with excitement, and the nanny with the radio poorly hidden behind her back. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice as sharp as a blade of ice. "Amelia and I are having dinner in the garden today," Richard replied, with a firmness that surprised both Jasmine and his own mother. Mrs. Beatrice opened her mouth to protest, but stopped herself when she noticed the determination in her son's eyes. "And does Dr. Paul approve of this exposure to the night air?" "Amelia is not a hothouse plant, Mother. Besides, the fresh air can only do her good." Turning to his daughter, he added, "Go get ready, sweetheart. I'll wait for you downstairs in half an hour." As Amelia ran to her closet, vibrant with the prospect of the special dinner, Richard made a discreet gesture for Jasmine to follow him out of the room. In the hallway, out of earshot of his daughter and mother, he faced her. "I don't know what you're doing, but for the first time in years I see life in Amelia's eyes." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I just want you to know that I've noticed the difference." Jasmine felt the weight of that acknowledgement. "Thank you, Dr. Hunter. Amelia is an incredible child. She just needs space to be a child." For a moment, something like regret crossed Richard's face, quickly replaced by his usual mask of self-control. "Continue your work, Miss Smith, but be careful with my mother. She has her reasons for being the way she is." As she watched him walk away down the hall, Jasmine felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps there was more human warmth in that house than she had first imagined, just buried under layers of pain and absence. Returning to the room, she found Amelia trying on a light blue dress she rarely wore. The girl's excitement was contagious. "Do you think Daddy will like this dress, Jazz?" "He'll love it," she assured her, helping her with the buttons on the back. "You look beautiful, like a princess." As she arranged Amelia's hair, Jasmine thought about the complex web of emotions that enveloped that family. The unprocessed grief, the guilt, the withdrawal as a defense mechanism, and in the middle of it all, a child yearning for love, and a grandmother unable to separate the pain of loss from the present she held in her hands. The autumn in Aspen Creek painted the trees in shades of gold and red, creating a postcard-perfect scene around the Hunter mansion. It had been almost 2 months since Jasmine had arrived at that house, and the changes, though subtle, were undeniable. Amelia now spent at least an hour a day in the garden, always accompanied by Jasmine, who invented quiet games that didn't compromise her fragile health. The girl still had occasional bouts of shortness of breath, but her cheeks had gained a faint rosiness that replaced her previous sickly pallor. On that Saturday morning, the two were sitting on a wooden bench near the lavender bed, watching the hummingbirds visit the flowers. Jasmine was weaving small wildflowers into Amelia's hair. "Did my mother like lavender?" the girl asked suddenly, surprising Jasmine with the direct question about a subject that was practically forbidden in that house. "I don't know, sweetie. Why do you ask?" Amelia shrugged, but her eyes revealed the weight of the question. "Hardly anyone talks about her. It's like she never existed. Sometimes when Grandma isn't looking, I see Daddy standing in front of her portrait in the hallway. He looks so sad." Jasmine's heart ached. How could a child understand the complexity of the grief of the adults around her? How could she carry the weight of an absence she had never even known? "I'm sure your mother was a wonderful person, Amelia, and that she would be very proud of the strong, smart girl you've become. Grandma says I'm just like her," Amelia whispered, "but I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. When she says it, she sounds sad and angry at the same time." Before Jasmine could formulate a response, they saw Richard walking across the garden towards them. Lately, he had been spending more weekends at home and often sought out his daughter during these moments outdoors. "Good morning, Princess," he greeted, kissing the top of Amelia's head. "I see you're enjoying the autumn sun. Jasmine said the sun helps our bodies make vitamins." "Amelia," explained enthusiastically, "and look what she did to my hair." Richard smiled, noticing the small flowers intertwined in his daughter's braids. His gaze met Jasmine's, conveying a silent gratitude. "It's beautiful," he agreed, sitting down beside them. "And how are you feeling today?" "Good. I haven't had a single attack all week." "It's true," Jasmine confirmed, and Dr. Paul was very pleased with the results of her latest tests. Richard nodded, visibly relieved. "This calls for a celebration. What do you think about going for hot chocolate in town this afternoon? There's a new pastry shop that they say has the best chocolate in the entire mountain range." Amelia's eyes lit up with excitement. "Can we really, and can Jasmine come too?" Richard seemed momentarily at a loss for words, but quickly composed himself. "Of course, if she'd like to join us." "I'd love to," Jasmine replied, suppressing a smile as she noticed the faint blush that colored Richard's face. "Great. We'll leave at 3, after Amelia's lunch and her medication time." "I'm going to tell Grandma," Amelia exclaimed, getting up excitedly. "No, sweetie," Richard interrupted, gently holding his daughter's arm. "Let me talk to Grandma. Why don't you go? Ask Betty for that carrot cake you like so much." As soon as Amelia skipped off towards the kitchen, Richard turned to Jasmine, his expression suddenly serious. "Amelia seems like a different child since you arrived," he commented. "Dr. Paul even mentioned reducing some of her medications at the next appointment." "She just needed a little more freedom and joy," Jasmine replied. "Children need sun, movement, stories. Amelia was living like a prisoner in her own home." Richard frowned, a flash of guilt crossing his face. "My mother always believed that protecting Amelia meant isolating her from anything that could trigger her attacks. But stress and sadness can also be triggers," Jasmine observed gently. "Your daughter has a strong spirit in a body that is still getting stronger. She needs balance." Richard watched her with an intensity that made her look away. "You're an unusual woman, Jasmine. You have a wisdom I wouldn't expect to find in someone so young." "I learned from my grandmother," she explained, feeling a warmth rise in her neck. "She always said that true health begins in the spirit. A happy heart strengthens the body. Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. And she was considered a healer in the neighborhood where we lived. People sought her out for all sorts of problems, from fevers to broken hearts." Richard smiled. "And did you inherit these gifts?" Jasmine hesitated. I don't know if they're gifts, Dr. Hunter. I believe it's more a matter of observing, of listening, of respecting each person's timing. Your daughter didn't need more medicine or isolation. She needed someone who saw her as Amelia, not just as a patient. A comfortable silence settled between them. Richard looked out at the mountains in the distance, lost in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. You know, sometimes I look at Amelia and I see so much of Lucy in her, the same curious eyes, the same musical laugh. For a long time that was too painful. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. I think I pulled away when she needed me most. It's never too late to get closer, Jasmine murmured, lightly touching his hand on the bench. Richard looked at that simple gesture, at Jasmine's delicate fingers on his, and something in his chest, long dormant, seemed to awaken. When he raised his eyes, he met hers, sincere, warm, without judgment. The moment was interrupted by the sound of determined footsteps approaching. Mrs. Beatrice was walking towards them, her face contorted in an expression of clear displeasure. Richard, we need to talk, she announced, casting an icy glare at Jasmine. In private. Jasmine stood up quickly. I'll go check on Amelia. As she walked away, she could feel Mrs. Beatrice's piercing gaze on her back. The matriarch had noticed the growing closeness between her and her son, and it clearly bothered her. In the kitchen, she found Amelia sitting at the table, devouring a generous slice of carrot cake under Betty's affectionate watch. This girl's eating like a champ now, the cook commented with satisfaction. Before, she barely picked at her food. Jasmine smiled, feeling proud of Amelia's progress, but her mind was in the garden, imagining the conversation between Richard and Mrs. Beatrice. She didn't have to wait long to find out. Half an hour later, Richard appeared in the kitchen, his face tense but determined. Jasmine, could you give us a moment? I need to speak with Amelia. Jasmine and Betty exchanged worried glances before leaving the father and daughter alone. In the hallway, the cook whispered, the mistress didn't like this idea of a trip to town. I heard her saying you're creating too many expectations for the girl. Jasmine's heart sank. Would the outing be cancelled? Her fears were confirmed when minutes later she heard Amelia crying from the kitchen. Instinctively she ran back, finding the girl in tears in her father's arms. But you promised, Amelia sobbed. Richard looked devastated. Princess, we'll go another day, I promise. Today, unfortunately, a work commitment came up that I can't postpone. Jasmine immediately saw the lie. There was no commitment. Mrs. Beatrice had managed to manipulate her son once again. Dr. Hunter, Jasmine intervened, unable to stop herself. Perhaps I could take Amelia to the pastry shop. It wouldn't be the same without you, but at least she wouldn't miss the outing. The girl looked hopefully at her father, who seemed torn. I don't know if that would be appropriate, he began. Please, Daddy, Amelia begged. Jasmine always takes good care of me, and I promise to take all my medicine before and after. Richard sighed, defeated by his daughter's pleading eyes. All right, but only if Jenkins drives and accompanies you. Thank you, Daddy. Amelia threw herself into her father's arms, her sadness momentarily forgotten. When Jasmine returned to her room to get ready, she found Mrs. Gable waiting for her, her face grave. Mrs. Beatrice wants to see you in the study, now. Jasmine's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. Tell her I'll be there as soon as I finish getting Amelia ready for the outing. She said it's urgent, the housekeeper insisted. And Amelia is also my responsibility, Jasmine replied firmly. I'll be in the study in 20 minutes. Surprising herself with her assertiveness, Jasmine went to Amelia's room, where the girl was already choosing a special dress for the outing. She helped her get ready, dried the last traces of her tears, and made sure she took her scheduled medication. When she finally knocked on the door of Mrs. Beatrice's study, Jasmine felt strangely calm, as if preparing for an inevitable battle. Enter, the matriarch's authoritative voice commanded. Mrs. Beatrice was sitting behind her desk, her fingers drumming impatiently on the polished wood. In front of her on the desk was an open folder. Miss Smith, she began, her voice laden with disdain, explain to me why you failed to mention on your resume that you were fired from your last job for negligence. Jasmine felt the blood run cold in her veins. It was a complete lie, but how could she prove it? "That's not true, Mrs. Beatrice. I left my last job because the family moved abroad." "That's not what this report I commissioned says," the matriarch retorted, pushing the folder towards her. "It seems there's a lot about you we don't know. And I'm beginning to wonder if we should entrust my granddaughter's health to someone with such a questionable history." Jasmine faced the woman before her, finally understanding the extent of her determination to get rid of her. Mrs. Beatrice was willing to lie, to forge documents, to do whatever it took to protect the control she wielded over the family. "You know that isn't true," Jasmine replied calmly, "but I understand your fear." "Fear?" Mrs. Beatrice laughed with contempt. "What would I have to fear from a servant like you? Of seeing Amelia happy, of seeing your son growing closer to his daughter again, of realizing that this house can be a home and not just a mausoleum for your memories and guilt." The color drained from Mrs. Beatrice's face. For an instant her mask of authority fell, revealing a woman broken by pain, but soon her expression hardened again. "You know nothing about this family," she hissed. "Nothing about what we've lost, about the sacrifices we've made. You are dismissed from this afternoon's outing, and I will seriously consider your continued employment in this house." The week following the confrontation in the study was one of palpable tension in the Hunter mansion. Jasmine had decided to stay only for Amelia, who had been devastated when the trip to the pastry shop was suddenly cancelled, with the excuse that Jasmine wasn't feeling well. It was a lie, of course, one of the many that now permeated the air of that house like a toxic perfume. Mrs. Beatrice had intensified her surveillance. Now, there was almost always a staff member nearby when Jasmine and Amelia were together, as if she needed constant supervision. The music sessions were forbidden, as were the stories that weren't directly related to the girls' studies. Jasmine endured it all in silence, but she sensed something darker was being plotted. Small objects began to disappear around the house, a silver picture frame, an antique brooch, a small desk clock, nothing that would draw immediate attention, but enough to create a climate of suspicion among the staff. One particularly cold afternoon, while Amelia was doing her breathing exercises prescribed by Dr. Paul, Jasmine noticed Mrs. Gable furtively entering her room. When she finished the session with the girl and went to check, nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling of invasion persisted. "Jess, you seem sad today," Amelia observed, as Jasmine brushed her hair before bed. "I'm just a little tired, little one." "Is it because of Grandma? I know she hasn't been nice to you." Jasmine hesitated. She would never speak ill of Mrs. Beatrice to her granddaughter, regardless of how the matriarch treated her. "Your grandmother just wants what's best for you, in the way she understands what's best." "But she's wrong," Amelia insisted, with a maturity surprising for her 7 years. "I was sick all the time before you came. Now, I only have an attack when I get very nervous or sad." Jasmine smiled, touched by the girl's perception. "Sometimes when people lose someone they love very much, like your grandmother lost your mother, they become so afraid of losing someone else that they end up suffocating those who are still here with too much care and protection." Amelia reflected for a moment. "I think my dad is scared too. But he's changing, isn't he? He smiles more now." "Yes," Jasmine agreed, remembering Richard's increasingly frequent smiles, especially when their eyes met over Amelia's head during meals or reading sessions in the garden. Richard's weekend visits had become longer, and he frequently found reasons to pass through Aspen Creek during the week, even if only for a few hours. The growing closeness between father and daughter was visible to everyone in the house, as was the evident attraction between him and Jasmine, although they both maintained a respectful and professional distance. "You like my dad, don't you?" Amelia asked suddenly, her eyes shining with a hope that Jasmine didn't have the heart to dispel. "Your dad is a good man, Amelia, and he's a father who is learning to reconnect with you. But do you like him the way princesses like princes in stories?" Jasmine blushed. "I think it's time for a little princess to go to sleep," she deflected, kissing Amelia's forehead. "We have that science experiment to prepare tomorrow, remember?" After Amelia fell asleep, Jasmine went to the window of her own room, watching the city lights in the distance. Her heart was heavy with premonition. She felt that something was about to happen and that she would have no power to stop it. That same night, Richard arrived unexpectedly for a dinner that Mrs. Beatrice had organized. The matriarch seemed unusually cheerful and had invited Dr. Paul and his wife, as well as the mayor of Aspen Creek and his daughter, a young widow named Clara who was strategically seated next to Richard. Jasmine, as was customary when there were important guests, stayed upstairs with Amelia, having dinner in the girls' room. But she could hear the laughter and the clinking of cutlery coming from downstairs, and she felt a tightness in her chest that she couldn't name. "Why can't we have dinner downstairs with Daddy?" Amelia questioned, unenthusiastically stirring the mashed potatoes on her plate. "Your grandmother is hosting important people," Jasmine explained, "and you need to rest early so we can be ready for our experiment tomorrow." The truth, which she dared not say, was that Mrs. Beatrice had been explicit. Neither Amelia nor Jasmine were to appear during the dinner. It was as if the matriarch wanted to present a different version of their family life to the guests, a version without the presence of the fragile granddaughter or the nanny who was gaining too much importance. Later, when everyone had retired and the house was quiet, Jasmine went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. She was surprised to find Richard sitting alone at the table with a half-empty glass of brandy. "Dr. Hunter," she said, hesitating, "I didn't know you were still awake." Richard looked up, and Jasmine noticed that his eyes seemed tired, almost sad. "Jasmine, please sit for a moment." She obeyed, feeling her heart inexplicably race. "How was dinner?" she asked, to break the silence. "Predictable," he answered with a sigh. "My mother doing what she does best, trying to control the lives of everyone around her." "The mayor's daughter seemed nice," Jasmine commented, hating herself for feeling that pang of jealousy. Richard laughed humorlessly. "Clara is a good woman. A widow for 2 years, no children, from a good family. Exactly the kind of woman my mother considers suitable for a new beginning." He made air quotes with his fingers on the last words, revealing his irony. "And isn't she?" Jasmine couldn't help but ask. Richard stared at her for a long time before answering. "Clara isn't the one who has made my daughter smile again. Clara isn't the one who makes me want to come home early just to hear the stories being told in Amelia's room before she goes to sleep." The air between them suddenly seemed charged with electricity. Jasmine felt her face burn and lowered her eyes to her own hands. "Dr. Hunter, Richard," he corrected her gently. "When we're like this, just the two of us, I'd like you to call me by my name." "Richard," she repeated, the words strange on her lips. "I don't think your mother would approve of this conversation." "My mother doesn't approve of much lately," he sighed. "Especially the fact that for the first time since Lucy was gone, this house feels less like a mausoleum and more like a home. And that's thanks to you, Jasmine." He reached his hand across the table, lightly touching her fingers. The gesture, though simple, carried an intimacy that made Jasmine's heart pound. "I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks," Richard continued, "about what I want for myself, for Amelia, for our future. And whenever I think about that future, you're in it." Jasmine felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Your mother would never accept it." "My mother will have to understand that I'm not a teenager anymore. I'm a 40-year-old man, a widower, with a daughter who, for the first time in years, is flourishing. And that happened because of the woman sitting across from me right now." He leaned in, and for a moment, Jasmine thought he was going to kiss her, but Richard just caressed her face with reverence, as if he feared she might disappear at any moment. "Tomorrow night, after Amelia is asleep, I'd like to talk with you more. About us, about possibilities. Would you give me that opportunity?" Jasmine nodded, unable to find words to express the storm of emotions she felt. When she finally retired to her room, she couldn't sleep. Her heart was torn between dizzying happiness and fear of what was to come. The next morning, while helping Amelia with the promised science experiment, creating a small volcano with vinegar and baking soda, Jasmine noticed an unusual commotion downstairs, raised voices, hurried footsteps. "What do you think is happening?" Amelia asked, curious. "I don't know, sweetie. Keep mixing the ingredients while I go check." As she opened the bedroom door, Jasmine nearly collided with Mrs. Gable, whose usually impassive face now wore an expression of alarm. "What's going on, Mrs. Gable?" The housekeeper hesitated, looking nervously over her shoulder. "You'd better go downstairs. Mrs. Beatrice is calling all the staff to the entrance hall." With a bad feeling, Jasmine asked Amelia to continue the experiment and promised to be right back. She descended the stairs with a heavy heart, as if she already knew what awaited her. In the main hall, all the household staff were gathered. Betty, Joe, the driver Jenkins, 2 maids, and even the gardener. Mrs. Beatrice stood in the center, her face a mask of indignation. Beside her, Richard looked confused and disturbed. "Ah, you finally deigned to appear," Mrs. Beatrice said upon seeing Jasmine. "Perhaps you can explain this." With a dramatic gesture, the matriarch pointed to a small side table, where an antique sapphire and diamond necklace was displayed. "This necklace belonged to my grandmother and was kept in the safe in my room," Mrs. Beatrice explained, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "It was given as a wedding gift to my daughter Lucy, and after her passing, it was meant to be preserved for Amelia when she grew up." Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. "I don't understand what this has to do with me, Mrs. Beatrice." "No? Then perhaps you can explain why, after I noticed it was missing 3 days ago. It was found wrapped in a handkerchief inside your purse during a routine inspection of the staff's quarters." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Jasmine looked incredulously from Mrs. Beatrice to Richard, who was watching her with an indecipherable expression. "That's impossible," Jasmine protested, feeling the blood drain from her face. "I would never touch something like that, let alone hide it." "Nevertheless, the evidence says otherwise," Mrs. Beatrice retorted. "It's not the first item to disappear since your arrival, just the most valuable." "Mother," Richard finally intervened, "don't you think you're being hasty? There could be another explanation." "What other explanation, Richard? The necklace was in her purse." "A purse? That stays in my room, which I don't lock because I never thought I needed to protect myself in this house." Jasmine defended herself, her voice choked with the injustice of the situation. "Anyone could have put the necklace there." Her eyes sought Richard's, silently begging him to believe her. She saw doubt in those eyes, but also something more, a will to believe that fought against suspicion. "Jasmine, you have to understand how this looks," he finally said, his voice low and tense. "What it looks like," Mrs. Beatrice interrupted, "is that we were completely mistaken about this girl's character, and that she has betrayed the trust we placed in her." Jasmine felt tears burn in her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She would not give the matriarch that satisfaction. "I have never taken anything that didn't belong to me in this house, Mrs. Beatrice, and we both know that." It was then that Mrs. Gable, who had remained silent until that moment, took a step forward. I saw Jasmine going through the drawers in your room 2 days ago," she murmured, avoiding looking directly at the nanny. Jasmine stared at her, stunned. "That's a lie. I have never been in Mrs. Beatrice's room." "Enough!" the matriarch boomed. "I will not tolerate a thief under my roof. You are fired, Miss Smith. Pack your bags immediately and leave this house by noon." "And Amelia?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Can I at least say goodbye to her?" "Absolutely not," Mrs. Beatrice replied, implacable. "I will not allow you to hurt that child any further. You have caused enough damage to this family." Jasmine looked at Richard, a final silent plea. For a moment it seemed he would intervene, defend her right to stay, or at least to say goodbye. But under his mother's imperious gaze he just looked away, his jaw tight with internal conflict. "I need to check some facts," he finally said, walking away towards the study. Heartbroken, Jasmine slowly climbed the stairs to pack her few belongings. In the hallway she found Amelia, who had come out of her room upon hearing the commotion. "Jazz, why are you crying? What happened?" the girl asked, her eyes wide with concern. Jasmine knelt, holding the girl's small hands in hers. "Amelia, my dear, I have to go away for a while." "Go? Away? But our experiment, and the stories, and who's going to help me sleep when I have nightmares? Your father will be here, and Betty, and—" Jasmine's voice failed her. How could she explain such a cruel injustice to a child? "It was Grandma, wasn't it? She never liked you," Amelia accused, with the merciless clarity of children. "Sometimes adults make difficult decisions for reasons they believe are right," Jasmine answered diplomatically. "But I want you to know one thing, Amelia. You are the bravest, brightest, and most special girl I have ever met. And nothing, and no one, can take that strength from inside you." Amelia threw herself into her arms, sobbing. "Don't go, Jazz, please don't go." It was then that Jasmine felt something being placed in her hand. It was a small, handmade necklace of colorful beads that Amelia had created during her craft lessons. "So you'll remember me," the girl sobbed. Jasmine put the necklace on, tears now streaming freely. "I will never forget you, my little one, and I know we'll see each other again one day." Before she could say more, Mrs. Gable appeared in the hallway. "Amelia, your grandmother is calling, and you, Jasmine, have 15 minutes to leave this house." With one last tight hug and a kiss on Amelia's forehead, Jasmine said goodbye. As she packed her bag, she carefully placed the necklace the girl had made in an inside pocket, along with the photo of her grandmother, Celeste. They were her most precious treasures now. The small inn in the commercial area of Aspen Creek was modest, but clean and welcoming. From her room window, Jasmine could see the town lights and, in the distance, the imposing silhouette of the Hunter mansion, standing out on the hilltop like an inaccessible castle. 3 days had passed since her forced departure from that house, 3 days in which she had cried until she had no tears left, in which she relived every moment, every word, every look exchanged with Richard and Amelia. The pain of the injustice was sharp, but what tore at her heart the most was thinking of Amelia, alone again, not understanding why her friend had disappeared from her life. Jasmine had enough savings to stay in town for a few more days, but she knew she would soon have to decide on her next step. Go back to New York City. Look for a job in another town. The idea of leaving Aspen Creek, of moving even further away from Amelia, caused her an almost physical anguish. That afternoon, while walking through the small town center looking for a cafe, Jasmine noticed an unusual commotion in front of the regional hospital. An ambulance had just arrived, and doctors were rushing to receive a patient. Something about the scene made her stop and watch, an inexplicable unease growing in her chest. It was then that she saw Richard jump out of his car, his face contorted with desperation, following the medics who were pushing a gurney into the hospital. Even from a distance, Jasmine knew, with the certainty that comes from the heart, that it was Amelia on the gurney. Without a second thought, she ran towards the hospital. The emergency room lobby was busy, and she managed to slip past the reception desk in the confusion. She followed the sound of raised voices until she reached a room where doctors and nurses were moving quickly around a small body. "Oxygen is dropping. We need to intubate. Temp is 104.4 and rising. I want a full blood count. Blood gases and a chest X-ray immediately." Richard stood in a corner of the room, his face pale with horror, his hands trembling as a doctor said something to him that Jasmine couldn't hear. Partially hidden by a curtain, she watched the scene with a pounding heart. Amelia was almost unrecognizable. Her face, previously just pale, now had a disturbing grayish hue. Tubes and wires connected her small body to machines that beeped insistently. Her lips had a bluish tint that sent a chill down Jasmine's spine. "The pneumonia has progressed to sepsis," she heard the doctor explain to Richard. "Her immune system is compromised. We're going to do everything we can, but the next 48 hours will be critical." Richard covered his face with his hands, his broad shoulders shaking in a silent sob. "It's my fault. I should have noticed the symptoms sooner." "You brought her in time," the doctor consoled. "Now we need to stabilize her before we can transfer her to the pediatric ICU." Jasmine stepped back, leaning against the hallway wall, her legs suddenly weak. Amelia. Her little Amelia was fighting for her life just a few feet away, and there was nothing she could do, or was there? Her grandmother Celeste's words echoed in her memory. "There are gifts that awaken only when they are truly needed, when love is greater than fear." She left the hospital unnoticed, her mind buzzing with conflicting thoughts and feelings. She returned to the inn, locked herself in her room and fell to her knees, doing something she hadn't done in a long time. She prayed. Not a formal prayer, but a deep appeal from her soul. "Grandma Celeste, if you can hear me wherever you are, help me. Help Amelia. She's just a child. She doesn't deserve to suffer like this." Exhausted by the emotional turmoil, Jasmine fell asleep, still kneeling by the bed. And then the dreams came. She was in a field of lavender, the same one in the hunter's garden. A beautiful young woman was walking towards her, wearing a simple white dress. Even though she had never seen her before, Jasmine knew instinctively who she was. Lucy, Amelia's mother. "She's slipping away," Lucy said, her voice as melodious as Jasmine had imagined it would be. "And you are the thread that still holds her to this world. How can I help her?" Jasmine asked in the dream. "They won't let me see her." Lucy smiled, a smile that resembled Amelia's in her rare moments of genuine joy. "You already know how. The gift that runs in your veins, passed down from your grandmother, is not just for healing with herbs and making teas. It's for healing souls, for bringing back those who have started to say goodbye. But I've never done it. I don't know how." "Love knows how," Lucy replied simply, touching Jasmine's chest exactly where, upon waking, she would find the necklace Amelia had made. "When the time comes, your hands. We'll know what to do." Jasmine awoke with a start, her body covered in a cold sweat despite the chilly mountain night air. She looked at the clock, 3 in the morning. Without questioning the impulse that moved her, she dressed quickly, grabbed her bag, and went out into the deserted street. The hospital was quiet at that hour, with only the night shift on duty. At the reception, a sleepy nurse looked up as Jasmine entered. "Can I help you?" "I've come to see Amelia Hunter," Jasmine replied with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. I'm family." The nurse checked the computer. "She's in the pediatric ICU, 2nd floor, but only immediate family can enter and only during visiting hours, which start at 10 in the morning." "Please," Jasmine insisted, leaning over the counter. "I'm her godmother. I just arrived from out of town and heard what happened. I just want to see her, even for a minute." Something in her expression, a mix of desperation and determination, must have touched the nurse, who sighed. "Look, I wouldn't normally do this, but her father is up there. He hasn't left her side since she arrived. Maybe if he authorizes it." She paused, examining Jasmine more closely. "Aren't you the nanny who used to work for them? I heard the nurses talking, said you were fired recently." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I took care of Amelia. And all I want is to see her, to know how she is." The nurse hesitated, but something in her expression softened. "I'll call the ICU and let them know you're on your way up. If the father doesn't authorize it, you'll have to leave immediately. Understood?" "Thank you," Jasmine whispered, feeling a wave of gratitude. On the 2nd floor, the pediatric ICU corridor was silent, except for the constant beeping of equipment. Through the glass windows, Jasmine could see children in different beds, all connected to machines, all looking too small, too fragile against the sterile white environment. Amelia was in the 3rd bed, and, as the nurse had said, Richard was there, sitting in an uncomfortable chair beside the bed, holding his daughter's limp little hand. Even through the glass, Jasmine could see the deep, dark circles under his eyes, the unshaven face, the rumpled clothes. Taking a deep breath, she gently pushed the door open and entered. Richard raised his head at the sound, and his eyes widened in surprise when he recognized her. "Jasmine, how—" "I heard what happened," she explained quickly, approaching the bed. "I had to see how she was." For a moment, Jasmine feared he would throw her out, that the anger over the supposed betrayal would overcome everything else. But what she saw on his face was only exhaustion and a despair so profound it hurt to look. "She's gotten worse in the last few hours," he said, his voice hoarse from not speaking for a long time. "The antibiotics aren't working. The doctors are talking about preparing her for a transfer to a hospital in Charlotte, if she can handle the transport." Jasmine moved to the other side of the bed and looked at Amelia. The girl was on a ventilator, her chest rising and falling in artificial movements. Her skin, always fair, now had an alarming translucency, with purplish patches visible on her arms where IV tubes for fluids and medication went in. Without asking permission, Jasmine touched Amelia's forehead. It was burning with fever. "When did it start?" she asked, her fingers instinctively seeking the girl's pulse. "2 days after you—" Richard hesitated. "After you left. It started with a slight cough, then a fever. We thought it was just a cold, but it got worse quickly. Yesterday afternoon she fainted during lunch and couldn't breathe properly anymore." Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of guilt. If she had been there, she would have recognized the signs sooner. She would have insisted on taking Amelia to the doctor at the first sign of fever. "Where is Mrs. Beatrice?" she asked, noticing the matriarch's absence. "She went home to take a shower and—" "Change," Richard replied, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of exhaustion. "She should be back in a few hours." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. "I didn't steal the necklace, Richard," Jasmine finally said, looking him in the eye. "I would never take anything from that house, let alone something so valuable to your family." Richard looked away, his expression tormented. "I know, or at least, a part of me always knew. I found Mrs. Gable going through the drawers in my study yesterday looking for something. When I confronted her, she confessed that my mother had instructed her to plant the necklace in your purse. The confirmation of the setup, though expected, still hurt. Why? My mother realized what was happening. Between us, I mean, and between you and Amelia. She felt she was losing control over the family, and my mother—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My mother doesn't handle losing control well. Not since Lucy." "I understand," Jasmine murmured, surprising herself with the sincerity of that statement. Despite everything, she truly understood the pain that had turned Beatrice into that bitter, controlling woman. Yet, alarm on Amelia's heart monitor began to sound, making them both jump. The girl's heart rate was rising rapidly, the fever likely reaching dangerous levels. A nurse rushed in, checked the vital signs, and left again, returning seconds later with a doctor. "We'll need more measures to bring this fever down," the doctor said after examining Amelia. "And her saturation is dropping again. I'm increasing the oxygen support and ordering a new round of antibiotics." Richard nodded mechanically, his face pale with terror. When the doctor and nurse left, he collapsed into the chair, hiding his face in his hands. "She's all I have," he whispered. "If I lose her—" Something ignited inside Jasmine at that moment. A certainty, a determination that came from a place beyond reason. Slowly she removed the small beaded necklace that Amelia had made for her and placed it gently in the palm of the girl's hand. "You're not going to lose her," she stated with conviction. "I won't let you." Placing one hand on Amelia's feverish forehead and the other over her heart, Jasmine closed her eyes. She didn't know exactly what she was doing, only following an instinct that came from generations of women in her family, healers who used touch and faith as instruments of healing. She began to murmur softly, words her grandmother had taught her, ancient words in a mix of English and Native American languages, a gentle chant that spoke of healing, of return, of light conquering shadows. Richard watched, skeptical yet desperate enough to accept any attempt to help his daughter. "What are you doing?" "Something my grandmother taught me," Jasmine replied, without opening her eyes, continuing her soft litany. "When someone we love is losing the will to stay, sometimes we need to remind them of all the reasons to come back." Her hands began to emanate a warmth that surprised even herself. It was as if a gentle electric current was flowing through her body, concentrating at her fingertips. The sensation was both familiar and new, as if an ancestral knowledge was awakening in her cells. "Amelia," she called softly, leaning in so her lips were close to the girl's ear. "Come back to us, little one. Your father is here. I'm here. And there are so many stories I haven't told you yet, so many songs we haven't sung together." To Richard's amazement, the monitors began to show a subtle change. Amelia's heart rate, which had been racing, started to stabilize. Her breathing, even assisted by the machine, seemed less labored. Jasmine continued her chant, now rocking her body gently, as if cradling the child. She began to hum a lullaby she used to sing to Amelia before bed, a simple melody that spoke of birds returning to the nest, of flowers blooming after the rain, of the sun rising after the darkest night. Time seemed to stand still in that hospital room. Jasmine lost track of how long she spent like that, singing, praying, channeling through her hands all the love she felt for this child who had entered her life so recently and already held such a special place in her heart. When she finally opened her eyes, she realized that the sky beyond the window was beginning to lighten with the first rays of dawn, and she noticed something else. Amelia's skin, which had been burning with fever, was now cooler to the touch. The purplish patches had faded, and most impressively, her eyes, though still closed, were moving beneath her eyelids as if she were dreaming. "Richard," Jasmine called, softly. "Look." He stood up, approaching with cautious hope. "The fever. It seems to have broken." At that moment, the ICU door opened, and the doctor came in for his morning rounds. He approached Amelia's bed, checked the monitors, and frowned in surprise. "This is remarkable," he commented, examining the girl's vital signs. "The fever has dropped significantly, and her saturation is much better. I'm going to order new tests to confirm, but it looks like the antibiotics are finally working." Richard and Jasmine exchanged a look, knowing it hadn't been just the antibiotics. Something else had happened that night, something no medical test could detect or explain. As the doctor continued his examination, a small hand weakly squeezed Jasmine's fingers. Amelia had opened her eyes, just a slit, but enough to recognize who was by her side. "Jas," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible under the oxygen mask. "I'm here, little one," Jasmine replied, tears streaming freely now. "I'm right here." Richard came closer, taking his daughter's other hand. "We're both here, Princess, and we're not going anywhere." The doctor, visibly impressed with the patient's rapid improvement, turned his attention to Jasmine. "Are you a relative?" Before Jasmine could answer, Richard intervened. "She's part of our family, and she just brought my daughter back to us." The spring sun in Aspen Creek spread its gentle warmth over the garden of the Hunter mansion, now transformed by the vibrant colors of the flowers Jasmine had insisted on planting. In the center of the main flower bed, purple lavender contrasted with white daisies, a small tribute to Lucy, who, according to Richard, had loved that combination. 6 months had passed since the miraculous night in the hospital. 6 months of profound changes for that family, and for Jasmine herself. Amelia's recovery surprised all the doctors. What should have been a long process of convalescence turned into a consistent and rapid improvement. In 2 weeks, she was home. In a month, she could play in the garden without getting tired. Now, her rosy cheeks and bright eyes barely resembled the fragile child who once fought for her life in an ICU. Jasmine watched Amelia chasing butterflies in the garden, her brown hair flying in the wind, free from the severe braids Mrs. Beatrice had once insisted on. The child's joy was a balm to everyone living in that house. "A penny. For your thoughts," Richard said, coming up behind her and wrapping her in a warm embrace. Jasmine smiled, leaning back against his chest. "I was just thinking about how much everything has changed. It feels like a different house, a different family." "It is a different family," he confirmed, gently kissing the top of her head. "A family that has finally found its way back to the light." The transformation hadn't just been Amelia's. Richard, once a workaholic and emotionally distant, now worked predominantly from home, dedicating himself to his daughter and the blossoming relationship with Jasmine. He had redirected some of his business ventures, moving away from areas that required constant travel and focusing on investments in Aspen Creek itself, like the new cultural center he was funding. But the most surprising change, and one that no one could have predicted, was that of Mrs. Beatrice. The matriarch, who had spent the first few weeks after the miracle at the hospital in a reclusive, guilt-ridden silence, gradually began to open up. First with small gestures, a shy compliment on Amelia's recovery, an almost inaudible thank you to Jasmine during dinner. Then, on a rainy morning, Beatrice knocked on Jasmine's bedroom door, no longer the maid's room but the room she now shared with Richard, though they still maintained a respectful discretion in front of the family. "May I come in?" she had asked, her voice stripped of its usual authoritarian tone. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Her gnarled hands trembling slightly, Beatrice did something no one would have ever expected. She asked for forgiveness, for the lies, the manipulation, the suffering she had caused. And, even more surprisingly, she revealed the deep root of her behavior. "When Lucy died in childbirth, something inside me died too," she confessed, rare tears streaming down her aged face. "I was traveling that day. I had insisted she wait for my return for the delivery, but the baby, Amelia, decided to come early. By the time I got to the hospital, it was too late." The guilt for what she couldn't prevent had turned into bitterness, and then into an obsession with controlling everything around her, so that nothing else could be taken from her without her consent. Amelia, instead of being seen as the continuation of her beloved daughter, became the symbol of her loss. "But that night at the hospital, when I thought I was going to lose my granddaughter too," Beatrice had paused, unable to continue for a few moments. "It was as if Lucy were there, telling me to let the past go, to love what I still have, instead of clinging to what I've lost." From that day on, a cautious truce was established. Gradually, the truce turned into respect, and eventually into an almost motherly relationship between Beatrice and Jasmine. The matriarch began to seek the young woman's advice on matters she once would have considered absurd: medicinal herbs for her, arthritis, ways to better connect with her granddaughter, even tips on how to make the house more cheerful and welcoming. "What planet are you on, Jazz?" Amelia's voice brought Jasmine back to the present. The girl had approached with her hands cupped, protecting something. "Look what I found." Jasmine knelt to be at the child's level. "What do you have there, little one?" Amelia carefully opened her hands, revealing a blue morpho butterfly with a slightly damaged wing. "It's hurt. Can you heal it like you healed me?" Jasmine exchanged a quick glance with Richard, who smiled encouragingly. This was another transformation of the past few months, the acceptance and development of the gift that had awakened that night in the hospital. At first, Jasmine had been reluctant to accept what had happened. She attributed Amelia's recovery to the doctors, the antibiotics, the girl's will to live. But subsequent events made it impossible to deny. There was something special in her hands, in her connection to healing. It was Mrs. Hazel, an old healer from the region who had known her grandmother Celeste decades ago, who helped Jasmine understand what was happening. Richard, seeing his partner's internal conflict, had sought out the old woman after hearing about her from Joe, the gardener. "The gift has always been in you, child," Mrs. Hazel had explained during their first meeting, "but it was dormant, waiting for the right moment, the right call. It was the love for that child that broke the barrier." Under the healer's patient guidance, Jasmine began to explore and develop her sensitivity. She learned to differentiate between physical and spiritual pains, to channel healing energy through her hands, to prepare natural remedies enhanced by her intention. It wasn't magic, Mrs. Hazel insisted, but an ancient knowledge, a wisdom, that connected the body, mind, and spirit. "It's okay if you can't heal the butterfly, Jazz," Amelia said, noticing Jasmine's hesitation. "Mrs. Hazel said some things are meant to be healed, and some are meant to be let go." Jasmine smiled, touched by the child's wisdom. "Let's try to help it, then we'll see what it chooses." Gently, she took the butterfly in her hands and closed her eyes. She felt the familiar warmth flow through her fingers, the connection she now recognized so well. It was not an imposition of healing, but an offering of energy, an invitation to restoration that the being before her could accept or not. When she opened her hands, the butterfly remained still for a moment. Then, to Amelia's delight, its wings fluttered, and it took flight, seemingly recovered. "Did you see that, Daddy? Jazz healed it!" Amelia exclaimed, jumping with excitement. Richard smiled, his eyes shining with admiration and love. "I see it, Princess. Our Jasmine has blessed hands." Before Jasmine could respond, Betty appeared at the garden entrance. "Miss Jasmine, there's a lady at the door asking for you. Says it's urgent." Exchanging an intrigued look with Richard, Jasmine headed for the house. On the main doorstep, a middle-aged woman waited, her face marked by worry and sleepless nights. "Are you Jasmine, the healer?" she asked anxiously. Jasmine hesitated. She never introduced herself that way, though she knew rumors of the miracle at the hospital had spread through the small mountain town. "I'm Jasmine, yes. How can I help you?" "My son. He has a fever that no doctor can explain. We've been to the hospital in Aspen Creek, then to Charlotte. Nothing works." The woman wrung her hands in desperation. "I heard you saved the hunter's granddaughter when all the doctors had given up." "I'm not a doctor," Jasmine cautioned gently, "and I can't promise miracles. I'm just asking you to come see him, please." Feeling Richard approach behind her, Jasmine turned to him, uncertain. This was the dilemma she had been facing in recent weeks: how to balance her new life at the mansion, her relationship with Richard and Amelia, with the call she felt to help others. To her surprise, it was Mrs. Beatrice who appeared beside Richard, having overheard part of the conversation. "Go," the matriarch said with a kindness that still surprised Jasmine. "If you can help that child as you helped Amelia, it would be selfish of us to keep you all to ourselves." Richard nodded, squeezing Jasmine's shoulder lightly. "I'll take you, and then I'll bring you back home. Our home." In that one word, "our," there was a promise. A future Jasmine had barely dared to imagine months ago. A future that now included not only love and family, but also a purpose, a gift to be shared. 2 weeks later, the Hunter mansion was unusually busy for a Sunday morning. Staff bustled about, arranging the garden, setting up tables under the trees, hanging colorful lanterns to be lit at dusk. In her room, Jasmine looked at her reflection in the antique mirror. The simple white dress, adorned only with a blue ribbon at the waist, had been chosen by Amelia. "To match the flowers in the garden," the girl had explained, now sitting on the bed swinging her legs as she admired her own new sandals. "Are you nervous?" Amelia asked, interrupting Jasmine's thoughts. "A little," she admitted with a smile. "It's a big day." "Daddy's more nervous," the girl confided, giggling. "I heard him dropping things in the dressing room and talking to himself." Jasmine laughed, imagining the scene. Richard, always so composed, losing his cool on his wedding day. A simple, intimate wedding, with only close family and friends, exactly as they both wanted. A soft knock on the door announced Mrs. Beatrice, elegant in a sky-blue suit, her white hair perfectly styled under a small hat. "May I come in?" she asked, still maintaining the habit of requesting permission, a stark contrast to her former authoritarian demeanor. Amelia ran to hug her grandmother, who received her with an affectionate kiss. "Grandma, doesn't Jazz look beautiful?" "She looks stunning," Beatrice agreed, approaching Jasmine with something in her hands. "And I thought perhaps you might like to wear this." She opened a small velvet box, revealing the sapphire and diamond necklace that had been the pivot of so many events. "It was Lucy's," Beatrice explained, "and before her my mother's, and before that my grandmother's. Traditionally, the women of the Hunter family wear it on their wedding day." She paused, her eyes welling up. "And now you are part of the family." Jasmine felt emotion tighten her throat. The symbol of so much pain and manipulation was now transformed into a symbol of acceptance and love. "Are you sure, Mrs. Beatrice?" "I'm sure Lucy would approve," the matriarch replied, helping Jasmine put on the necklace. "And please, it's about time you just called me Beatrice, or perhaps Mother, if you prefer." The gesture, more than any words, sealed the transformation of their relationship. Amelia watched, her eyes shining with contentment at seeing the two most important women in her life finally united. An hour later, under the clear North Carolina mountain sky, Jasmine walked through the garden, transformed into an open-air chapel. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, and lavender and daisies decorated every table and corner. In the background, a string quartet played softly. Richard waited for her under an arch of flowers, his face lit by a smile that spoke more than 1,000 words. Beside him, Amelia, the flower girl, held a small basket of petals that she scattered enthusiastically along the path. Among the guests, Jasmine recognized faces that had become important in her new life. Mrs. Hazel, now her spiritual mentor, the mother of the boy she had healed weeks ago. Doctors from the hospital who had witnessed Amelia's miracle, Richard's friends who had slowly become her friends too. And in a discreet corner of the garden, she felt more than saw a presence only she could perceive. Her grandmother, Celeste, smiling with approval, and beside her, a young woman who looked very much like Amelia, Lucy she knew, blessing their union with her spiritual presence. When she finally took Richard's hands before the officiant, Jasmine felt that all the paths of her life, even the most painful ones, had conspired to bring her right here to this moment of fulfillment. "You transformed this house," Richard whispered during the exchange of rings. "You transformed our lives." "We transformed together," she replied, her heart overflowing with gratitude and love. "And we will keep transforming." At the end of the ceremony, as the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Amelia approached the new couple with a small package in her hands. "It's a present for you," she said shyly. Inside the box was a framed drawing, Amelia, Richard, Jasmine, and Beatrice holding hands, and above them an ethereal female figure with open arms, her mother Lucy watching over them all from above. "It's our family," the girl explained, "all together forever." Jasmine knelt, hugging Amelia tightly, feeling Richard join the embrace. Over the girl's shoulder she saw Beatrice approach, her eyes shining with restrained tears. With a gesture she invited the matriarch to join them, completing the family circle. In that moment, under the emerging starry sky, Jasmine understood that her true gift was not just healing bodies, but healing hearts. To bring together what was fragmented, to bring light where there was darkness, to transform pain into hope. And as the soft music filled the night, as laughter and conversation filled the once silent garden, she made a silent promise to herself. She would honor this gift every day, not just through spectacular healings, but in the small gestures of love, in the patience with wounds still healing, in the daily construction of a family that was now genuinely hers. 5 years later, the garden of the Hunter mansion was festive once again. But this time, it was to celebrate the birthday of Amelia, now a healthy and radiant 12-year-old teenager, surrounded by school friends and her 2 younger siblings, the 4-year-old twins Anthony and Aurora, the fruit of Jasmine and Richard's love. Beatrice, now a doting grandmother who insisted on baking the birthday cakes with her own hands, smiled as she watched Jasmine lead the children in a game. Time had softened her features, lessened the weight she carried on her shoulders. She was often seen in town accompanying Jasmine on her visits to the sick, learning some of the healing knowledge she had once dismissed as superstition. Richard, who had finally found a balance between work and family, photographed every moment of the party, determined to preserve memories he had once feared he would never have. And Jasmine now, known throughout the region as a respected healer, divided her time between the family she had built and the people who sought her help. She had transformed a small cottage at the back of the property into a healing space, where she blended her ancestral knowledge with modern studies in herbal medicine and psychology, which she had decided to pursue at the local college. The real miracle, she reflected as she watched her family gathered, had not been the dramatic healing that night in the hospital. The miracle was in the small daily transformations, in the forgiveness that healed old wounds, in the love that flourished where there had once been only fear and control. In the house once marked by silence and rigidity, laughter, music, and stories now echoed. Where severe rules had reigned, there was now room for expression and growth, and where grief had frozen time, life now followed its natural course, honoring the past without being a prisoner of it. As the sun set on that celebratory afternoon, Jasmine looked up at the sky, silently thanking her grandmother, Celeste, Lucy, and all the women who came before her, bearers of gifts that surpassed common understanding. Not just the gift of healing bodies, but the greater gift of healing souls and reuniting hearts separated by pain. High above, a star began to shine, the first of the night. Not to announce extraordinary miracles, but to remind them that love, when true and persistent, is always the greatest gift we can offer one another. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Jasmine and the Hunter family has touched your hearts and shown that true healing begins when we make room for love in our lives. To hear other emotional stories like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. If this narrative brought a little light to your day, show your appreciation by leaving a like and sharing it with someone special. And of course, we would love to know in the comments, what moment in this story touched you the most? Your feedback is what inspires us to continue creating narratives that warm the soul. Until next time.